I still remember the exact moment I realized I was invisible in my own family. It was my brother Ryan's 25th birthday party, held at the country club where my mother had spent 3 months planning every excruciating detail. I was 28, freshly laid off from my marketing job, and wearing a dress I'd bought on clearance because my savings account was running dangerously low. But none of that mattered to anyone in that room. "Ladies and gentlemen," my mother announced, tapping her champagne flute with a silver spoon, "I want to take a moment to celebrate the true achievement in this family. Ryan has just been promoted to senior investment analyst at Henderson and Brooks." The applause erupted like thunder. I clapped too, because what else could I do? Ryan deserved it. He'd always been brilliant, focused, driven. The problem wasn't his success. It was how my mother wielded it like a weapon against me. "Unlike some people," Mom continued, her eyes sliding toward me with surgical precision, "Ryan understands what it means to have ambition, to make something of yourself." The room fell silent in that awful way that tells you everyone knows exactly who's being discussed. My face burned. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by their plates. My father, Richard, sat at the head table saying nothing. He never did. "Mom," Ryan said quietly, touching her arm. "Maybe we should." "I'm just being honest, sweetheart," Mom interrupted, patting Ryan's hand. "Your sister has had every opportunity, every advantage, and what has she done with it? She can't even hold down a job." I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. That's when I saw him across the room, Daniel Winters, Ryan's colleague from Henderson and Brooks. He was watching the whole humiliating spectacle unfold, his dark eyes filled with something that looked like sympathy. Or maybe pity. I couldn't tell which was worse. "I should go," I mumbled, standing abruptly. "Oh, of course you should," Mom said with a brittle laugh. "Run away. That's what you do best, isn't it, Emma?" I left the country club that night convinced that my mother was right. Maybe I was a failure. Maybe I deserved her contempt. But what I didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that I'd been hiding something for the past 6 months. Something that would change everything. The real question was whether I'd have the courage to finally reveal it. Because the truth I'd been keeping had the power to either vindicate me completely or destroy what little remained of my relationship with my family. And in 72 hours, whether I liked it or not, that secret would be exposed in a way I could never have anticipated. The countdown had already begun, and there was no stopping what was coming next. Daniel Winters found me in the parking lot. I was sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned white, trying to remember how to breathe normally. The humiliation was still fresh, still burning through my chest like acid. A tap on my window made me jump. "Sorry," Daniel said through the glass, his voice muffled. "I didn't mean to startle you." I rolled down the window halfway, not trusting myself to speak without my voice cracking. "That was brutal in there," he said, cutting straight to the point. "Your mother, she doesn't hold back, does she?" "You don't have to do this," I said, staring straight ahead. "The pity thing. I'm used to it." "It's not pity." Daniel leaned against my car, considering his next words carefully. "I'm just wondering why you let her talk to you like that." The question caught me off guard. What was I supposed to do? Make a scene at my brother's party? "You could have defended yourself," he said simply. "Unless there's a reason you didn't want to." There it was, that unsettling perceptiveness I'd noticed about him before. Daniel had a way of seeing through people's carefully constructed walls, and right now, he was looking directly through mine. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but my voice wavered. Daniel smiled slightly. "Sure you don't." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and handed it through the window. "Listen, I'm having a small gathering at my place tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just a few people from the industry. You should come." I looked at the card like it might bite me. "Why would you invite me to anything? You don't even know me." "I know Ryan," he said. "And if you're anything like him, you're probably more interesting than you let people believe." He paused, studying my face in the dim parking lot lights. "Besides, I have a feeling you could use an ally right about now." There was something in his tone that made me look up sharply. "What do you mean by that?" But Daniel was already walking away, his footsteps echoing across the empty lot. He turned back once, calling over his shoulder. 8 o'clock tomorrow. The address is on the card. Come if you want to finally stop being invisible." I sat there for a long time after he left, turning the card over in my hands. What did Daniel Winters know about being invisible? He was successful, confident, the kind of person my mother would actually approve of. Why would he care about my family's dysfunctional dynamics? The answer came to me as I was driving home. He didn't care about the dynamics. He cared about something else entirely. And that's when I remembered the conversation I'd overheard at the party, just before my mother's speech. Two executives from Henderson and Brooks, talking in low voices near the bar. "The Phoenix Project is going to revolutionize everything," one had said. "When they announce the lead developer next week, it'll be the biggest story in tech this year." The other had laughed. "If they can keep it under wraps until then. You know how these things leak." My hands tightened on the steering wheel again, but this time not from humiliation. Because I knew something those executives didn't know. Something that Daniel might have suspected, but couldn't possibly confirm. The Phoenix Project wasn't some abstract corporate initiative to me. It was personal. It was mine. For the past 6 months, while everyone thought I was unemployed and floundering, I'd been working 16-hour days in my apartment, coding an artificial intelligence platform that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. Henderson and Brooks had approached me through a third-party recruiter, wanting absolute secrecy until they were ready to launch. The contract I'd signed was worth $2.3 million, with royalties that could double that within a year. My mother thought I was a failure. My father thought I was lost. Ryan pitied me, even as he tried to defend me. But in 5 days, at Henderson and Brooks's annual shareholders meeting, they would announce the Phoenix Project to the world. And when they did, they would announce me as the lead architect. The question now was what Daniel Winters actually knew, and why he'd chosen tonight of all nights to extend an invitation I couldn't quite decode. I looked at his business card one more time in the glow of a streetlight. Tomorrow night I would get my answer. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Daniel's gathering would set in motion a chain of events that would force my secret into the open far sooner than I'd planned. And when the truth finally emerged, it wouldn't just change how my mother saw me. It would shatter everything she thought she knew about her perfect family. Daniel's apartment was nothing like I expected. While most successful investment analysts lived in sterile luxury condos, Daniel had chosen a converted warehouse loft in the Arts District, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, and walls covered with abstract paintings that probably cost more than my car. "You came," he said when he opened the door, genuine surprise in his voice. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. The gathering was small, as promised. Maybe 15 people, all holding wine glasses and engaged in animated conversations about market trends, emerging technologies, and the future of finance. I recognized a few faces from business publications, venture capitalists, startup founders, a tech journalist I'd read religiously. This wasn't just a casual get-together. This was a room full of power players. "Why am I here?" I asked Daniel quietly, accepting the wine glass he offered. "Because I wanted to see if my instinct was right," he said cryptically. "Come with me." He led me through the crowd to a quieter corner of the loft, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. The view was breathtaking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something I didn't fully understand. "Ryan talks about you sometimes," Daniel said, watching my reflection in the dark glass. "Did you know that?" "I'm sure those conversations are fascinating," I said bitterly. "Actually, they are." Daniel turned to face me directly. "He says you're brilliant. That you were always the smartest person in the room, even when you were kids. He says you taught yourself to code when you were 12, built your first algorithm when you were 16. I shifted uncomfortably. "Ryan's generous. He also says your mother has been crushing you for years, making you feel small because you didn't follow the conventional path she wanted." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "But here's what interests me. Ryan thinks you gave up. He thinks you're drifting." "And what do you think?" I asked, my heart starting to race. Daniel smiled slowly. "I think you're the Phoenix Project." The wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. "How?" I started, but he held up a hand. "Henderson and Brooks isn't as secure as they think. When you hire a third-party recruiter to find talent, people talk. Rumors circulate. And when those rumors mention an AI platform that could revolutionize market prediction, people like me start paying attention." He paused, studying my face. "I've been trying to figure out who they recruited for 6 months. Then I met Ryan, learned about his brilliant sister who supposedly couldn't hold down a job, and everything clicked into place. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and strangely relieved all at once. "If you know," I said carefully, "why haven't you told anyone? This information is worth millions." "I know." Daniel took a sip of his wine. "But I'm not interested in selling your secret, Emma. I'm interested in what you're going to do with it." Before I could respond, a voice called out from across the room. "Daniel, there you are." I turned to see a woman approaching, mid-40s, sharp suit, carrying herself with unmistakable authority. I recognized her immediately from the financial news. Catherine Rodriguez, CEO of Henderson and Brooks. My blood ran cold. "Catherine," Daniel said warmly. "I didn't realize you were coming." "Last-minute decision," she said, then her eyes landed on me. For a moment, her expression was completely neutral. Then something shifted, a flash of recognition quickly masked. "And who's this?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Daniel looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a challenge. This was a test. He'd orchestrated this entire evening to put me in this exact position, face to face with the CEO of the company I'd been secretly working for, in a room full of influential people. The choice was mine: stay invisible or step into the light. "This is Emma," Daniel said when I remained silent. "Ryan's sister." "Ah," Catherine said, her expression unreadable. "The family resemblance is striking." She extended her hand. "Catherine Rodriguez." I shook it, my mind racing. Did she know who I was? The contract had been handled entirely through intermediaries. I'd never met anyone from Henderson and Brooks in person. But the way she was looking at me suggested. "Emma's been working on some interesting projects," Daniel continued, his tone casual but his words deliberate. "AI development, market prediction algorithms. Cutting-edge stuff." Catherine's grip on my hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "Is that so?" she said softly. "How fascinating. You know, we're launching something similar at Henderson and Brooks next week. Perhaps you've heard about it." This was it. The moment of truth. I could play dumb, protect my secret for 5 more days, and walk away from this conversation with my anonymity intact. Or I could own it. "The Phoenix Project," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "Yes, I've heard about it. In fact," my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Emergency calls. I pulled it out and saw my father's name flashing on the screen, along with 3 missed calls from Ryan. "Excuse me," I said to Catherine and Daniel, stepping away to answer. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Emma." My father's voice was strained in a way I'd never heard before. "You need to come to Mercy General Hospital. Now." "What happened?" "It's your mother." He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "She collapsed at home an hour ago. They're saying it's her heart. It's serious, sweetheart. You need to come now." The world tilted sideways. I looked back at Catherine Rodriguez, standing next to Daniel, both of them waiting for me to finish whatever sentence I'd started. In that room was everything I'd worked for: validation, recognition, the chance to prove my mother wrong about everything she'd ever said about me. But my mother was in the hospital, possibly dying, and she still believed I was a failure. "I have to go," I said to Daniel and Catherine, my voice hollow. "I'm sorry, it's a family emergency." I left the apartment without another word, my mind spinning with impossible choices. Because now I had to decide. Did I tell my mother the truth about my success while she was lying in a hospital bed, potentially on the edge of death? Or did I let her go on believing the lie, protecting her from the shock that might literally kill her? And either way, would I ever forgive myself for the choice I made? If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 100 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. The fluorescent lights in the ICU waiting room turned everything the color of death. Ryan was already there when I arrived, his perfect composure finally cracked. His tie was loosened, and he'd been running his hands through his hair so much it stood up in uncharacteristic disarray. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "With her. They're only allowing 1 person at a time." He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Emma, I'm so sorry about earlier. The party, what Mom said." "Don't," I said, sitting beside him. "It doesn't matter now." But it did matter. It mattered more than ever, because somewhere in this hospital, my mother lay connected to machines, and the last thing I'd heard her say to me was that I couldn't even hold down a job. "What happened?" I asked. Ryan rubbed his face with both hands. "She was home alone. Dad found her collapsed in the kitchen when he got back from his golf game. The doctors are saying it was a major cardiac event. They're running tests, but..." His voice broke. "They said the next 24 hours are critical." Critical. Such a clinical word for the possibility that my mother might die believing her daughter was a disappointment. The door to the ICU opened, and my father emerged. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 2 hours. His shirt was rumpled, his silver hair disheveled, and his eyes, normally so stoic and controlled, were filled with fear. "She's asking for you," he said to Ryan. "Both of you, actually. But they'll only allow one visitor at a time." Ryan stood immediately. "I'll go first, if that's okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. After he disappeared through the ICU doors, my father sat down heavily in the chair he'd vacated. For a long moment we sat in silence, the same silence that had defined our relationship for years. "She's always been hard on you," he said finally. "Your mother." "Dad, you don't have to." "Let me finish." He turned to look at me, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before: regret. I should have stopped her. All those years of comparisons, the criticism, the way she made you feel small. I told myself it was her way of pushing you to be better. But that was cowardice. I was protecting myself from conflict instead of protecting my daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. "She loves you," he continued. "In her own broken way, she does. But she's also terrified." "Terrified? Of what?" "Of losing control. Of things not going according to plan." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Your mother grew up poor, Emma. Did you know that? Her family had nothing. She built herself into the woman she is today through sheer force of will and following every rule society told her mattered. Structure, prestige, conventional success, those things aren't just preferences to her. They're survival." I'd never heard this story before. My mother never talked about her childhood. "When you chose your own path," Dad continued, "when you didn't follow the script she'd written in her head, it terrified her. Because if success could be achieved outside the rules she'd followed so rigidly, then what did all her sacrifices mean? So she tore me down to protect her own narrative," I said quietly. "Yes." My father's voice was heavy with shame. "And I let her." We sat with that truth between us, years of damage acknowledged but not yet healed. "There's something I need to tell you," I said. "About what I've been doing for the past 6 months. But before I could continue, Ryan burst through the ICU doors, his face pale. "She's crashing," he said, his voice rising in panic. "They're calling a code. They said," he choked on the words. "They said we should prepare ourselves." Everything happened in slow motion after that. Medical staff rushed past us into the ICU. Alarms blared. A doctor emerged to usher us into a small consultation room, his face grave. "Your mother's heart is failing," he explained. "We're doing everything we can, but I need you to understand the severity of the situation. The next few hours will determine whether she survives this." "Can we see her?" Ryan asked, his voice cracking. "Soon. We need to stabilize her first." After the doctor left, the three of us sat in that small room, united in fear for the first time in years. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel Winters. "Catherine wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. She knows. This is your chance. Tomorrow morning." While my mother fought for her life, I thought about the Phoenix Project, about the announcement scheduled for 5 days from now, about the validation I'd spent 6 months working toward in secret. And I thought about my mother, lying in a hospital bed, possibly taking her last breaths while still believing her daughter was a failure. The choice was suddenly crystal clear. I stood up abruptly. "I need to make a call." In the hallway, I dialed Daniel's number. He answered on the first ring. "Emma? How's your mother?" "Critical," I said. "Daniel, I need you to do something for me. Tomorrow morning, when you meet with Catherine Rodriguez, I need you to give her a message." "What message?" I took a deep breath, making a decision that would change everything. "Tell her I want to move up the announcement. Not in 5 days. Now. Tonight, if possible. And I want it done here, at Mercy General Hospital." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You want to announce the Phoenix Project at a hospital?" Daniel said slowly. "While your mother is in the ICU? I want her to know the truth before." My voice caught. "Before it's too late. Can you make it happen?" "Emma, this is insane. The shareholders' meeting is planned, the press releases are drafted, Can you make it happen or not?" Another pause then. "Give me 2 hours." I hung up and stood in that sterile hospital corridor, my heart pounding. What I'd just set in motion was either the bravest thing I'd ever done, or the most reckless. But I was done being invisible. Done letting my mother's narrative define my worth. If she was going to leave this world, she would leave it knowing exactly who her daughter had become. The only question was whether the truth would save her or destroy what little time we had left. It took Daniel 90 minutes instead of 2 hours. I was sitting with Ryan and my father in the ICU waiting room when he arrived, accompanied by Catherine Rodriguez and 2 people I didn't recognize. A man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase, and a woman with professional camera equipment. "Emma," Daniel said, slightly out of breath. "We need to talk. Now." My father and Ryan looked at me in confusion as I stood. "What's going on?" Ryan asked. "I'll explain everything," I said. "Just trust me." Daniel led us to a larger conference room the hospital had made available. As soon as the door closed, Catherine Rodriguez turned to me with an expression that mixed admiration and exasperation. "This is the most unconventional product launch I've ever been part of," she said. But Daniel made a compelling case. "So here's what we're going to do." Over the next 15 minutes, she outlined a plan that was absolutely insane and somehow perfect. Henderson and Brooks would hold an emergency press conference in the hospital's media room in 1 hour. They would announce the Phoenix project ahead of schedule, revealing me as the lead developer. The presentation would be brief but comprehensive, establishing me as one of the most promising AI architects in the country. "But here's the critical part," Catherine said, looking directly at me. "After the announcement, we're going to bring your mother into the media room, assuming the doctors clear it. We'll have medical staff on standby. And you're going to tell her yourself, in front of everyone, what you've accomplished. You want to film my mother's reaction to finding out her daughter isn't a failure?" I said incredulously. "I want to capture a genuine human moment," Catherine corrected. "The story isn't just about the technology, Emma. It's about you. About someone who was underestimated and counted out, who built something revolutionary while everyone thought she was doing nothing. That story will resonate with millions of people. It was manipulative. It was exploitative. It was also exactly what I needed." "I'll do it," I said. "On one condition. My family sees the announcement first, before anyone else. They deserve to understand before the rest of the world does." Catherine nodded. "Agreed." I turned to Daniel, who'd been watching this entire exchange with a small smile. "Why did you do this? Why go to all this trouble for someone you barely know?" He shrugged. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible in your own life. And because watching you find your voice, that's worth more than any commission I'd make selling your secret." There wasn't time to process the weight of that statement. The man with the briefcase, Henderson and Brooks's head of communications, was already coordinating with hospital administration. The photographer was testing her equipment. The machinery of revelation was in motion. I went back to the waiting room to get Ryan and my father. "I need you both to come with me," I said. "There's something you need to see." Ryan's eyes were filled with questions, but he stood without protest. My father, however, remained seated. "Your mother is stable for now," he said quietly. "The doctors just told me. She's sedated, but her vitals are improving. They think she's going to make it." The relief that washed over me was so intense I had to steady myself against a chair. "Then she needs to see this too," I said. "As soon as she's able." In the conference room, I stood before my father and brother with Catherine Rodriguez beside me. And I told them everything. I told them about the third-party recruiter who'd contacted me 8 months ago, impressed by an algorithm I'd published in an obscure tech journal. I told them about the months of secret development, the prototype that had stunned Henderson and Brooks's testing team, the contract worth more than both their annual salaries combined. I told them about the Phoenix project. Ryan's mouth fell open. My father's eyes widened in disbelief. "You've been working on this the entire time?" Ryan whispered. While we all thought." "I needed to prove it to myself first," I said, "before I could prove it to anyone else. I couldn't stand the thought of announcing something and then failing, of giving Mom more ammunition." "Jesus, Emma," Ryan said, and then he was hugging me fiercely. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see it." My father stood slowly, his movements deliberate, and placed both hands on my shoulders. When he looked at me, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I should have said that more. I should have said it every day." An hour later, the press conference began. Catherine Rodriguez stood at a podium in the hospital's media room, addressing a hastily assembled group of journalists who'd been promised a major announcement regarding Henderson and Brooks's most significant technological development in a decade. She spoke about AI, about market prediction, about the future of finance. And then she said my name. The architect of the Phoenix project is Emma Mitchell, a self-taught AI developer whose revolutionary approach to machine learning will transform how we understand market dynamics. "Emma, would you like to say a few words?" I stepped up to the podium, my hands shaking, very aware that this moment was being recorded, photographed, and live-streamed. I talked about the technology. I explained the algorithms in terms general enough for journalists to understand, but specific enough to establish credibility. I answered questions about timeline, about applications, about what this meant for the industry. And then a journalist asked, "Ms. Mitchell, you've been working on this for months in complete secrecy. What motivated you to maintain such a low profile?" I looked at that room full of strangers, all waiting for my answer. And then I looked past them to where my father and Ryan stood in the doorway, watching with something that looked like wonder. "I was afraid," I said honestly. "Afraid that if I failed, it would confirm what some people already believed about me. That I wasn't good enough. That I couldn't succeed on my own terms." I paused. "But I've learned something through this process. Other people's narratives about your worth don't have to become your reality. You can write your own story." The cameras flashed. The journalists scribbled notes. And then the door opened again, and 2 nurses wheeled my mother into the room in a hospital bed, for poles trailing beside her. The entire room fell silent. Mom looked fragile in a way I'd never seen, pale, weak, vulnerable. But her eyes were open and alert, and when they found me standing at the podium, they widened in confusion. "What is this?" she said, her voice hoarse. "Emma, what's going on?" I stepped down from the podium and walked to her bedside, very aware that every camera in the room was capturing this moment. "Mom," I said gently, "I need to tell you something. For the past 6 months, while you thought I was unemployed and directionless, I was actually developing an artificial intelligence platform for Henderson and Brooks. It's called the Phoenix Project, and it's going to change the industry. The contract is worth over $2 million. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "I wanted to tell you so many times," I continued. "But I couldn't stand the thought of you not believing me, of you thinking I was making it up to impress you. So I stayed quiet until I could prove it beyond any doubt." My mother's eyes filled with tears, the first tears I'd ever seen her cry. "You," she started, then stopped, struggling with words. "You did all this?" "Yes. But I thought I said such terrible things to you." "I know," I said. "And they hurt. But Mom, I need you to understand something. I don't need you to believe in me anymore for me to succeed. I believe in myself. That's enough." The silence in that room was deafening. Then my mother reached out with a trembling hand, pulling me closer. When she spoke, her voice was broken, raw with emotion and regret. "I was wrong," she whispered. "About everything. I was so wrong, and I'm so sorry. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Years of damage couldn't be healed in a single moment, no matter how dramatic. But it was a beginning." The press conference ended shortly after, with Catherine Rodriguez gracefully redirecting attention back to the technology, while my family had its private moment in front of the world. Later, after the journalists left and my mother was returned to the ICU, stable, recovering, and still processing the revelation, I found Daniel in the hospital corridor. "You orchestrated all of this," I said. "From the moment you found me in the parking lot. You knew this would happen." "I suspected," he corrected with a slight smile. "I hoped, actually. I've seen too many brilliant people disappear because they didn't have someone to push them into the light at the right moment." "Thank you," I said, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." "That's what allies do," Daniel said. "And Emma, this is just the beginning. What you've built with the Phoenix Project is revolutionary. But what you did today, owning your truth in front of everyone, that's even more powerful." He was right. 3 weeks later, my mother was released from the hospital with a clean bill of health and a completely revised perspective on her daughter. We started family therapy, all 4 of us together, working through decades of dysfunction with professional guidance. It wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others. Mom still struggled with her need for control, and I still carried scars from years of feeling inadequate. But we were trying. Actually trying. The Phoenix Project launched to widespread acclaim. Within 6 months, it had exceeded every projection Henderson and Brooks had made. I was offered positions at 3 major tech companies, speaking engagements at conferences around the world, and interview requests from publications I'd idolized for years. And Ryan, he quit his job at Henderson and Brooks to launch a startup with me, using my technology as the foundation for a company we built together, as equals. My father attended every board meeting, asking thoughtful questions and offering quiet support when I doubted myself. My mother attended too, and though she still occasionally slipped into old patterns of criticism, she caught herself faster now. And when she did, she apologized. 1 year after that terrible birthday party at the country club, we held a different kind of celebration. A launch party for Mitchell and Associates, the company Ryan and I had built from the ground up. At the podium, giving a toast, my mother stood with a champagne glass in her hand and looked directly at me. "I spent years trying to force my children into boxes I'd built from my own fears," she said to the assembled guests. "I convinced myself I was protecting them, pushing them toward success. But what I was really doing was protecting myself from the terrifying possibility that there might be more than one path to a life worth living." She paused, her voice wavering slightly. "My daughter taught me that brilliance doesn't always look the way we expect it to. That success isn't always loud or conventional. And that the greatest achievement isn't following someone else's map, it's having the courage to draw your own." She raised her glass toward me. "To Emma, who was never a failure, who was always exactly who she needed to be." The room erupted in applause. And for the first time in my life, I stood in front of my mother and felt genuinely, completely seen. The invisible daughter had finally emerged from the shadows, not because she'd changed, but because she'd finally refused to hide. And that made all the difference.